Hi, Thanos.
Hello, Yue, and hi to everyone.
Hi to everyone. Welcome to our new format.
Our new format, as we said last time. All right, maybe to set the context first, right? Should I do it? Do you want to do it?
No, you can do it.
Right. You might know us from the podcast What's the Deal with That, which we have been doing for the last 2 years. I'm Thanos, if you don't.
I'm Yue.
And we have been doing this podcast for the last 2 years. It was a massive success, or let's say for us, it was a massive success. And for certain, what we wanted to do is to now do a new installment, rather, let's say, a more structured and maybe a little bit more focused form, would you say?
And also to provide a bit, I think that's a more visual effect, and so we can also provide some like statistic or charts and pictures, So that's so it will be our moving forward. It will be our new format with video.
Exactly.
Of course, you can also find us on Spotify as audio, as the original podcast. But for someone who would like to see our faces, you can find us on YouTube.
Maybe some people do. A lot of people do it right now, and we have to say we also wanted to follow the trend. We don't do it only because we think that we are so. We don't do it to become famous. Let's say like that.
Why? What's wrong with famous?
No, it's nothing wrong with famous, but not like the celebrity famous and stuff. We're just doing it because we wanted to add this level on top. And too much ado for nothing. We haven't even told the name yet. So the new name. Welcome to our podcast, Shaping Context.
Welcome to a new podcast or new YouTube videos, and we will be providing also the same, I would say, in form of a series, right?
So yeah, what is about? Do you want to give maybe a little bit of context on how will we do it and what's the idea behind that?
Yeah. So last year we already used this kind of like a series format. So there will be 3 episodes with about the same topic, but in a different perspective, giving very different perspective in 3 different videos, or 3 different podcasts. And now we are moving on, using the same format, but moving on to a bit different, giving a bit different perspective. So our first episode in the one series will be about, giving you just this, providing some insights, but not necessarily with our own opinions, just to provide some background informations.
Right, so research and background information, as I said, on topics which we will talk about in a moment, but please do continue with
and doing
the rest.
A summary, right? And then the second part of the one series, we will invite our guests, who is either some, I wouldn't say huge famous personality, but someone who converse very nicely in this field, And then the third part of the series will be providing you a conclusion out of the last 2, I would say, right?
Right, and a kind of debate also, let's say, on the topics that we have. So
from different sides.
Exactly. Yeah. So we don't want to say that there are always just 2 sides on a topic. There are, of course, more, but what we want to do is to give a little bit, because we're going to talk about topics which are on the intersection of politics, economy, and technology. You can imagine that some of them might be controversial, and what we will try to do is to maybe, let's say, always sum it up in kind of 2 categories, let's say positive, negative, or pros and contras, or future looking and looking back, some kind of, so to get the 2 poles,
different sides of stories, and
right, or the 2 different sides of stories, where do people stand on this
but
matter?
We will still stay on our our most favorite topics, which are technology, and economy and politics, right? So
exactly.
that stay the same with us, and then there will be some surprising episode or surprising series that is more fun for us, but stay tuned, I would say.
Of course, and just another point to that, I think those of you who have heard our podcasts before or our different episodes will know that we have talked a lot in the last 2 years about technological matters, for example, fusion, or about political matters, for example, Deutsche Bahn and transportation in Germany, let's say, or the housing crisis in Berlin, or economical matters. For example, we had one about, I think, financial generals, right? Or what was it about the interests? I think.
Yeah,
right?
the interest rate, and also our favorite, first ever episode about capitalism.
Right, exactly. And what we kind of felt these 2 years, to give a little bit more focus on why that happened, is that these three areas, and that's why we decided to bring them all together, they are usually very connected with each other in our world, right? You cannot have technology without it being a political and economical matter. Like, important technologies disrupt societies, right? So it has to do with politics and economy. You cannot have economy anymore without technology in our world. There's
And
no place
also
like
without political influences. So
that. Exactly.
yeah, so that's why we think that kind of intertwined with each
Exactly.
other nowadays, and our goal or our objectives are to provide you that kind of context.
Exactly, and we found, however, that it is more important to bring them together and connect them, and we will try to give some context over there, because it becomes very complex at some point to try to connect all these matters. And usually what happens, or what is the case with us, is that in the cyclone of information that we have every day, you cannot really know what happens. And what we would wish, and that's why we're doing it also, is to have some context which helps shape our opinions on matters. And that's why we called it also Shaping Context.
Exactly. Okay, so
what's the deal for today? So what's the topic that we have today? What's our first intersection of politics, economy, and technology?
our first theory is about competitiveness in the European Union.
Right. So let me ask something. Why competitiveness, and why the European Union? So why did we do that? And
Okay.
are we only going to talk about European Union, or what?
No, I think the competitiveness is always relative, so means that we're going to compare with some other economies, right? And this why we have that idea is there was a competitiveness report from the European Commission,
Right.
which was written or was completed in September 2024, last year.
So last year.
And it was done by the team and our beloved former central bank chef
Mario
Mario
Draghi,
Draghi, right? Everyone knows him. I would say everyone knows him in the European
I
Union.
think so.
And,
He also has been in so many offices up to now, and this is definitely one of the names that you hear all the time.
Yeah, he is a very famous bureaucrat. Also,
Yeah.
so.
Bureaucrat. I love that you used bureaucrat and not politician.
They are different. I mean, that's a
Different
huge
thing.
difference.
He was a politician, right? In Italian politics, of course.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
He was the
But
prime
not
minister.
on the European Union level. So
Mhm.
yeah, and so the context is ever since the founding of European Union in the 1950s. Yeah, the goal of the idea of European Union was actually to promote stability, peace. Because we know that before the Second World War there was a lot of wars in Europe. Yeah, so the original idea was more like political reason, out of political reason, just to have peace between the countries. Yeah, but over times it had changed and also evolved into more to gain also more independence or strategic autonomy from other major powers.
Major powers,
And
exactly.
at that time, I was in the 1980s or 1990s was from the US and Russia, right? But now, of course, since the playing field has changed,
Right.
so we are moving on more to a multipolar world,
Exactly, that's what I wanted to say. Buzzword, multipolar world, right?
Yeah, so it's
we have even more players.
Yeah, there are one new player, which is China, and so the the competitiveness report is more about to compare ourselves to other major powers, which is the U.S. and China.
Right. And to put it even in a wider context, so also one founding principle of the European Union, as you said, of course, it was to secure peace in the continent, stability, but also prosperity, right? So our first topic that we are doing right now, what we're talking about, of course, if it's about competitiveness, we know that it comes from the economy, but at the same time, it is a deeply political matter because it has to do with in what extent is a society like the one in EU, which is also comprised from different countries and different states, which have different levels of development, let's
level.
say.
Yeah, exactly.
How do they manage to actually be prosperous, Wohlstand in German, which is an important thing in order to go into the future, and of course. Because that one we haven't said before, the competitiveness report is very much connected to technological changes and developments, right? You cannot think, and we will talk about it when we get into the specifics of the report, but it's not about a more general kind of competitiveness. It doesn't use only economic buzzwords. It's about things that have to do with technology, whether it be energy, for example, or manufacturing, or AI and IT, right? All of these come into play.
But for now, I mean, we will focus on, I think, 3 topics general out of the report, because the report is comprised of like 300 pages.
Yes.
So we're not going to copy all the content here.
No, because we would sit here for another 5 years and would still not be.
Yeah, exactly. So
I mean, just a small parenthesis here. I really would like to, at some point, and I didn't find any information about that, to know how this report was actually comprised. I mean, yes, it's called the Draghi report, but there are a lot of people who were behind it actually, and I really would want to see the working document. Like before this report came out, what was the document that everybody worked in, collaborated?
There are probably I don't know, 1,000 of Excel sheets or something.
Yeah. It's a huge thing, and at the end, though, I have to say that would be my point. It's pretty concise as far as a report goes. So there are also, it's not just blah blah and words. It's very well structured. There are a lot of visuals, which we will provide links to, of course, in our description. And it doesn't give you the very dry feeling of, oh, this document, I cannot even read it, right? So for me, I would say it was even almost a joy. I wouldn't say that, but
it's a very comprehensive report.
Yeah,
with,
exactly. But it's long.
In a lot of different fields and different topics, but we will just focus on those topic, and just to give a bit context, the objectives of European Union moving towards prosperity, right? So the first thing is not just about being competitive, but the goal is also to reach, decarbonization future.
Right.
So it means like a Green Deal future, and to reach the climate goal, which is 2035.
Right. Exactly.
And so we have to keep that in back of your mind. So
right.
that decarbonization is the buzzword here, and how to go about it, how to reach the goal. And
at the same time, and that's why it becomes necessary to write a report and make a strategy, because it's not trivial to reach those goals while at the same time ensuring stability, right? Politically, geopolitically, and economically, and competitiveness, right? So to put it very bluntly, for example, yes, it is we support this goal, right? We can clearly say that. It's a very good goal to reach the climate goals that Europe has set for 2035. But this means that, for example, a lot of industries will encounter a major disruption in order to reach those goals.
And have to pay the price, I would
Exactly.
say. And this is what we are seeing right now in Europe. And just to begin, about energy, yeah. So the European energy prices, I think we will put the charts here, yeah. Comparing to China and the US, it's about like 2 to 3 times. The electricity price is about 2 or 3 times of the US prices on the market.
Right.
And natural gas prices are about 4 to 5 times of the US prices. And that's I would say that's for manufacturing, or also for a lot of traditional industries, is a huge disadvantage, let's say, which we call it economics competitive disadvantage. Yeah.
Exactly.
And
because at the same time, for let's say manufacturing, for example, so generally we're going to focus on 3 industry sectors. There are even more mentioned in the report, but just to put it in the frame: energy, manufacturing, and tech plus AI. And now we're talking, for example, more about manufacturing, because this is the largest consumer of energy. For example, if you want to create cars, if you want to produce machines, you have to use energy, right? And at the end, if the energy that you use here, right, is 5 times more expensive than the one that you use in the US, this will affect your unit economics and the price of the product that you put in the market afterwards, which will make it less competitive. To put it in a nutshell.
And
right?
also, of course, energy is a very important input. We call it a production input factor for both, manufacturing. Either you call it like automotive industry or pharmaceutical industry, and for and especially for the tech industry. Because you can imagine the data center uses or consume a lot of electricity.
Exactly, very important also. So whatever, and this is also, as you said, it is a kind of a bridge to also other economics, right? So if you are, for example, a software company, right? And you want to start something with AI in Europe, you are not directly affected by the energy price, in the sense that you're not really having a factory producing cars, but you have to use data centers in order to produce the AI and whatever other software that you're using.
Just like to run the machine learning algorithm.
Exactly.
Right?
And these will be much more expensive if you're using them in the EU and the EU data centers, rather than, for example, the US data centers.
Yeah, and so what's the root cause?
Exactly. What does the report say about that?
The report said the root cause is because, first is because of the European Green Deal, the decarbonization policy, yeah. And then secondly is the most famous thing, which is the Ukraine war, right?
Right. So let's take it one at a time. So the decarbonization we said in the beginning, right? This brings us to the crux of the matter, I would say. So one of the 2 goals that Europe has concerning its economies, or its economy as a whole, comes in direct contrast with the other goals. Because you are trying to decarbonize, it means that you cannot really use the energy that is less expensive. Therefore, you end up being less competitive.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
And the other, about the Ukraine war, how was that affected? Like, what is the background behind there?
The background is just because the main sources of energy is using natural gases, to kind of produce energy in the European Union. And because of the war, the natural gases price on the market just spike, like crazily spiking.
Exactly.
Yeah, and since then there is a huge spike also on the market, even on the world market, and not to mention like in the European market, and so
We have to say there also that especially in Germany, but also in other countries in Europe, the problem was especially strong because they were very dependent on gas from mostly Russia, for example. And with the embargo that came and the sanctions that started after the war, the political direction in where we get energy from in Europe has shifted, making it more difficult to attain a cheap energy. Of course, at some point, for example, I remember that was the case in the beginning of the war in Ukraine, that everybody said, yes, there is liquid natural gas, for example, in the US. Why don't we get this? But this doesn't come at the same price and doesn't come so easily and so quickly as
and we will also go into that. So and also there's another element to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just the market price is high because of the war,
Mm-hmm.
but also because the collective bargaining power in the European Union is very fragmented. Let's call it.
Right.
Like, for example, you can imagine if the US, the energy company in the US, they come to, if they want to buy any kind of resources in the world, they just go collectively to one of the the providers of the resources, and they say, okay, I want to buy X amount ton per year, and they can collectively get a very good bargaining prices, and so does China. And at the national level, they will collectively purchase the same resources.
Right.
But in the European Union, it doesn't happen on the European level,
Exactly.
which is actually more like on the national level of all these 27 countries,
Yes.
right? And so it doesn't get the same bargaining power.
Exactly, or it makes it more complex. This is a very important point that's why this report is actually comprehensive and good, because it mentions such effects that are not directly visible to everybody, right? So somebody would think, yes, why EU is also a big organization? Why can't it buy power as a whole? Well, it can, but it takes much longer because of the way that it is built to reach an agreement. And usually what happens, and that is also mentioned in the report, is that some countries do tend to go their own way because they have, of course, politically to cater to their specific interests. And this is, let's say, a little bit of a of a basic, I wouldn't call it a flaw, but it's a catch-22 in Europe, that the whole construct of it and the structure is a collective one. It's a union, but it comes always in a kind of contrast and conflict with the interests of the nation states. Whereas that, for example, is not the case in China, which is even bigger, but also more massive, right? And in the US also as well.
That with in the US, the US is more like a federation.
Yeah.
So they have more like collective power between all the states, and it doesn't. The federal government has much more. I would say the authority in such matter, and in the European Union doesn't have that kind of authority on the union level, let's say.
Well, not yet, at least, right? So it is a long project that might at some point. I mean, I can imagine also, and I think it's also mentioned in the report, that there will be a point that some such bargaining, for example, might be done on a European level, but you have to reach agreements in order to do it, trade agreements with other countries, for example, which will allow something like this, and this takes time because it has to go through the whole European Union process of decisions. Maybe let's make we said something a little bit about China, and what I wanted to also bring in is, what about the other energies though? Okay, decarbonization, yes, it makes it more difficult to get the energy that we all knew up to now, coal, and etc., etc. But what about the green energies? I mean, do they even play a role, and is it just difficult in Europe, or do other countries, for example, like China or the US, actually use them more? Like, is it possible? That would be my question.
It is possible. I mean, China is one of the leading producer of like solar energy. And also, I think the wind turbine is also around like 60% or so.
Yes.
So it's and I think we are the European Union is kind of in a dilemma because on one side, on the one hand, you want to we would like to decarbonize. Decarbonize our industry that's using more like natural, not so much natural resources, but renewable energies. Yeah, but then on the other hand, the European Union doesn't produce a lot of our own solar panels, and all the equipment that is necessary for all this renewable energy. So and the problem is then we will need to buy from someone else. So either we buy it from. So that's the second, the second side. We need to buy from the equipment from China, let's say.
Right.
Yeah. But then but there's another level of it because it doesn't have because European Union doesn't have like a collective industrial policy.
Right. Exactly. So an industry, for example, a manufacturing industry in France might be going about their affairs pretty differently than
they would prefer
in Germany.
the nuclear energy, for example.
For example, exactly. And they are allowed to do it because they can get it from their grid in France, for example.
Yes.
Whereas Germany will have to go its own way. And even smaller players, for example, might even not have the capacity to do that, but will rather have to buy energy from others.
Yes,
Europe.
so we have the same problem as with purchasing of natural gases, and there is no comprehensive, bargaining or even collective policy to do it on the European Union level, and everyone is doing only on the national level. You know? So and with a very different interest also, like Germany would like to go, the solar and wind energy, and then some other country like as we mentioned before, France would want to go about the nuclear energy. So there are a lot of different interests, different goals. So there is no comprehensive like one goal in front of your eyes.
And to sum it up and close it with that, yes, of course, it would be possible, for example, to have decarbonization and have it also even help in an economical way, but this is not the case in Europe, at least yet, because their infrastructure to build more of these resources and, of course, let's say the common goal or the common strategy might be there, but the implementation of it is very dependent on the countries.
On the national states.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe we talked a little bit about manufacturing. Let's go to maybe also the problem of productivity and innovation, which is also combined with manufacturing in Europe, I think, because there was also a lot of information in the report about that, right?
Yeah, especially about like like Europe is stuck in the technology and industry of the previous century, which is the 20th century.
Right.
Which is true. I would say because the automotive industry is still the biggest in Europe.
It is, and not only in Germany.
It has actually it employed the most people in the union. Actually, like about 6%. 6% of population is working in the automotive industry, which is, I mean. So when one industry goes down, then everyone goes down somehow.
Right, and maybe to expand a little bit on this part, the automotive industry here, and in the report as well, is a good representative of larger industries in Europe, which at the same time are very old, like their existence is there a long time, and they're very difficult to change, right? And that, I think, is a big problem in the competitiveness as well. So yes, as you said, on the one hand, if the automotive industry goes down, then you really have a political problem in Europe, as we see also now with Germany, for example, where it seems that Volkswagen, for example, for various reasons will have to close some factories, and this is becoming a big thing. But at the same time, you are thinking and saying, yes, but can't they change? Can't they innovate and go into something new? Can they make more e-cars? This is very difficult in Europe.
Yeah, there's various reasons why this is difficult. I think the in the report also gives like one statistic which is not surprising, I would say. Like in the EU, there is actually no European companies which was created the past 50 years, with and has capitalization of over like 100 billion euro, and this is surprising. I mean, it's not surprising to me, but I mean it's surprising comparing to other countries. Yeah?
Yes,
because in the US it has so many. I mean, you can think of few already in your mind, right? I have example is I have 6 US companies was created the past 50 years, which has a capitalization of over $1 trillion.
Wow.
Oh, sorry, euro. So,
yeah.
And the best, I would say, example that is Google and Amazon.
Right, exactly. The big tech companies in the IT sector and internet sector, which have been able to scale up. I mean, we don't want to talk about our age, but let's say we are old enough to have lived in a time where internet was very young, right?
Yeah,
and Google
exactly.
at some
in the
point,
90s.
yeah, in the 90s,
yeah.
Google didn't exist, or at some point it was a startup. But then it became this huge company that we all know right now. Same with Amazon, for example. And this means that this didn't happen by magic. There was a scale-up process, which is very difficult in Europe, because, and that was what is said in the report, but this is something that people talk about all the time, because of regulations, for example, which are very inconsistent and restrictive in the different countries, for example, in Europe, but also on a pan-European level, because they're also taking a lot out of the innovation, not in the first level, because there are a lot of innovative smaller companies in Europe. There even are a lot of startups, for example, which can be able to, start and do something, but they cannot really scale up without a large cost.
Yeah, because just like 3 huge reasons. One, every national states in the European Union has very heterogeneous compliance or regulation. So it doesn't have like European-wide regulation, and also it's the high cost of tax compliances in different national states, all the different countries in the union, and also there is a higher cost of like complying for the smaller, the SME, the small medium enterprises, and because there is a different level of compliance when you reach certain size.
Right.
So there's overall very high cost of scaling up, and like just compare not only with the US but also
with
like
China.
with China. There are also a lot of company which was created in the end of the 90s. For example, Baidu, and Tencent is also. It's only interestingly. Baidu is created only a year after Google, so 1998.
But nobody knew it there, at least not here.
Not in Europe, but actually in China is one of the biggest tech company.
Right, and this is also the point that is mentioned in the report, that what happened in that time is that Europe failed to capitalize on this digital revolution that came in the 90s with the internet. Because of this restrictive regulation, and because, let's say, of a general bulkiness in moving fast in Europe. What the report is saying in that aspect, which we will talk about also maybe in the third part of our series, is that one way for Europe to get ahead in that is to predict and be able to invest very well in the next revolution. So now, for example, with Industry 4.0 and with AI coming up, everybody is thinking that automation is going to play a huge role for manufacturing,
Yeah.
but also for other industries. And now it is on Europe to actually not miss that train as well, but to actually be able to allow investments over there, because at the end, that's what also it said in the report, it's about public and private investments, right? In the private investors will not invest in a company to scale up, for example, if they are sure that it's going to take a long time,
Yeah,
and they will
because
not have
technology innovation,
profits.
technological innovation is actually an input, a production input factor as well. You know, so in order to innovate, so to be productive, yeah, in even in the manufacturing, you need to be also innovative,
Right, exactly.
I mean, that using all those technology to move up the scale and also to be productive in a way that you can produce more.
Exactly. And one point on R&D and innovation, because this is actually interesting and important. We also all kind of know that, but in Europe, we know that there are a lot of very high class, for example, institutions which provide really good research and development, right? And the public sector is actually spending at least as much as the US for if on average and
Yeah.
in total in research and innovation. But there are two problems. First of all, only 1/10 of it, says in the report, takes place on the EU level. So
Yeah,
it doesn't
mostly on
take
the national level.
exactly, which means that the changes or the developments that are happening there are very much like
coordinated,
nationalized
I would
and
say.
exactly and not coordinated. So good things might happen in France, but they don't necessarily trickle down also to Germany or to even like smaller countries, for example, and vice versa. And second problem, the private sector investment for R&D is much smaller in the EU than in other places, which bears the problem that, which I have seen also in my personal career up to now. Yes, you might have like very good developments, R&D on a state level in Europe, but they will not necessarily reach the market.
They will not be capitalized, or what we call it, or commercialized. There are a lot of very good innovative institutes, like for example Fraunhofer, but this doesn't necessarily convert it into new product.
Exactly.
That's I would say that is kind of a problem. And also in the report mentioned, like like you said before, just give some number here. The private spending on innovation, like research and development, in the private sector in the EU is only like 1.3% of the GDP, and comparing to China has almost 2, so 1.9%, yeah. And the US is huge, 2.4.
Yes.
And driven mostly by the private companies.
Right, exactly. And that's why they seem to have a much faster pace or a much larger capacity in
And
actually
also,
being able to
and
commercialize.
also like commercialize directly, straight for, like immediately after, and also more flexible, being more flexible, in when that happened in the private sector. And as we know, there are a lot of like corporations in the EU, like Volkswagen and or some pharmaceutical companies. They have like really innovated business units. Doing, like Volkswagen has actually created new units doing just autonomous driving,
Right.
for example. But why it doesn't translate or convert that into capitalization? Because as we know, all these companies are created like almost like, I don't know, 100 years ago.
Right, exactly.
and that they are they are very lucrative and successful the past 50 years, yeah. And that it's make people being more like, I would say, is my words, lazy.
Well,
to
let's
innovate.
say resistant to change, maybe,
Yeah.
right?
And the motivation to do more than that is small.
Yeah, totally agreed. To stay on that topic, what happens afterwards? Says the report, for example, let's take unicorns, right? Companies which are created and go on to be valued over 1 billion US dollars or euro. In that case, it doesn't really matter, right? 30% of them between 2008 and 2021 were founded in Europe, but then most of them went over and relocated, in the vast majority of them, to the US. So exactly what we were saying before. Yes, you're very good in innovation. Yes, even here unicorns are starting, but at some point when they want to scale up, they go over to the US because they know that they will benefit from much more coordination, less taxation, less
also
regulation,
the
or
true single
more
market
consistent.
as the one of the biggest reason. I think that's something like we don't see that so much, or people don't talk about that much. Is the true single markets, and I mean the objective of European Union is originally was one single market, actually, right? But because of the very reasons that we mentioned before, that like the tax compliance and the national level regulation,
Right.
and also the different level of between the small and medium enterprises to the bigger scale and different compliance level, and that is restriction or is constraint to reach a certain scale, because people attend, okay, they create a company, they founded a company in, like, let's say in Berlin in Germany, and they fail to scale up in Europe. They just somehow they will become successful, and then they move on to the US.
Exactly. And this feeds to this story of missing competitiveness, because this is actually worse in both ways, right? So you actually, in a way, invest into creating good companies, but then when you have created them, you lose them. It's an analogy to the brain drain that happens, for example, in some European countries. You invest much in the education of a person, and then the person leaves the market and goes somewhere else. One thing that we have to say also is that because of the fragmentation of EU and the time that takes to actually come to some decisions, you mentioned the market, right? You don't have a unified market which can actually directly buy those projects. And the productivity and the buying power of China and the US is much higher than actually in Europe, so that products are created here, they cost more, but also people cannot buy them because they earn less in comparison, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and also, I mean, exactly this the true single market. China is a 1.4 billion single market as one. Yeah, you just need to launch your company in one place in China, and then you can reach actually everywhere in China, within China, right? And the same as in the US.
Yes.
When you launch one company in Silicon Valley, for example, and then you can go scale in the whole US.
Yes.
It doesn't matter where. But in Europe, this is very difficult to be a German company, and then you want to scale up, for example, also to the Eastern Europe or Mediterranean Europe, or even just move to France, the neighboring country.
Exactly.
And this is kind of the barrier to for companies to scale up.
Yes, and last point to this, to close it up with a little bit last comment about tech, for example. This is especially true for companies having to do with AI, and the best example for that is, let's say, why does everybody talk about ChatGPT, right? Okay, this is a matter that also happens. Okay, at the moment, people are talking also about DeepSeek because it made an entrance like lately, but from the point that the AI hype started, it was a company based in the US which actually had the ability to capitalize and become the brand name that everybody knows in that. Are there foundational models and companies which are good in that in Europe? Yes, there are. For example, Mistral, right? But they're not as potent and as possible as the ones in US, for example, making it difficult for them to gain more space in the market, get their products out there, get people paying about them, and internally then stifling also competitiveness of Europe in total. Because if you're a company and you want to use AI, you're going to think about going to ChatGPT, for example, and not to a European product.
Or you if you want to use like the AI on premises, which is not a cloud solution, and then people will probably looking at DeepSeek, because DeepSeek is possible to download the whole algorithm and then run on your own data center. So so this is and this is as what we said before, right? So Europe failed to scale up the Asia's very successful or innovative companies, and then we lose kind of this entrance or being a pioneer, and for especially I think in tech it's very important to be the first,
right,
and
exactly.
To be the first is not just because of the capital or the venture capital that comes to you, but also to be the platform that everyone is going to use, right? Just like looking at Google.
Yep.
Why is it successful? Because Google is the platform. Everyone is using it, so it collects all the data. And the same with Baidu and Tencent and so on. So you have to be it's a different playing field, and comparing to the traditional industry like automotive or even like shipyards and so on. You have to be the first one to be competitive somehow, because you need to be the first one and then gain all the pie in the market, the whole pie, and so it left to no one else to have part of the pie.
Yes, of course, and that
it's somehow it's a bit you can say it's monopoly and so on, but it's not exactly. I think this is one of the things that you can say that works even in our time, like really consistently in markets, that if you manage to be the first one, you will remain the largest power, unless you do things really badly at some point, which means that somebody else will take your place, right? And we will discuss that more in the third episode when we talk about the pros and cons about what EU wants to do. There are ways for EU to benefit from that, in that it actually becomes the producer of quality products. Think of Germany up to now in its manufacturing, which was creating always like very high quality machinery, which was then exported in the rest of the world. Think about then final products of tech industry, AI or software, which then become the standard because they are so good and more solid. But this takes much longer, right, than actually being able to place a product and make money now. That's one of the big problems. Yeah, and also if you are the platform, the first in the market, you kind of set up the standard. This is another thing, right?
Right. Maybe let's close with something about, maybe I would call it like a sneak peek on things that we will discuss about in the third episode, when we say about, okay, let's get the look in the future. Let's see about what we can do. The report is not just saying what is going on, but also what EU is planning to do in order to address those problems, for example. And the three pillars that we found that are very important are to first refocus the work of the EU. So this talks about, for example, coordinating things better, right? Having a new committee, let's say, which is funny because everybody makes fun of Europe about having too many committees, and what's the answer? Let's create a new one about competitiveness. But if it works, then it's good, actually, right? If it doesn't stay only on paper. One is that. The other is actually accelerating the work, which I think is something that people have been saying like since a long time, like don't take so much time to decide something, but move faster. And the third is about simplifying the rules, which is basically going towards this regulation and the consistency, not making it difficult for a company to switch from France to Germany, for example, or vice versa,
Yeah,
but to be
and
able
also
to
probably
move,
harmonize the rules. Yeah.
right? And this is exactly this is what you were saying before, right? About the differences from EU in comparison to China and the US. They don't have to harmonize their regulations, for example. They are the same wherever they are.
I mean, especially on this, the topic we're talking about. I mean, there are some the provincial regulations which are different, but it's not on the level of what the topics we're talking about. You know, or even like the states level. There are some different laws and regulation, but in terms of innovation, the federal government has the same. So. This is exactly the difference between European Union, China, and the U.S. So
Right. So basically, I mean, this makes sense. What they are writing the report, you wouldn't expect also something different, I would say. But the big question remains: will this happen? Right? A report is a report. It's not an implementation, and of course, it's not a law. So
I would say stay tuned to our next episode.
exactly.
We'll invite someone who also would like to talk about this report.
Right, and we will have some more context maybe about what is actually happening from these things that we discussed. For example, up to now, is something actually taking place? Like we're gonna focus and get a little bit more the view from the ground, from the real, let's say, to actually understand what is happening, and then we're going to close with what we think would be the pros and cons, as we said, from the whole situation. And until then, stay tuned.
Stay tuned. See you.
See you.